Welcome to the Accomplish More podcast, created specifically for the small business owner who doesn't think small. I'm your host, Gayla Scrivener. This show is where you'll learn practical ideas, hints, tips, and tricks to help you grow your small business where you can leverage your time and to accomplish more. Hello there, and welcome to the Accomplish More podcast. I'm Gayla Scrivener, and I thank you for joining me today. Recently, I've had the question posed to me, when should I expect to see the return on investment for delegating tasks? Well, actually, it's a common question. Early on in any business, it's hard to let go. Yes, there's reasons of being able to do the tasks yourself, but more often than not, there's the fear of not being able to afford help. Then, when you do delegate that first task, you wonder how fast you'll make that money back. Taking the first step in delegating is taking your first step in becoming a leader and moving your business toward growth. So how should you view ROI when it comes to delegating? Yes, you should see the ROI on your financial statements, but where you should first start evaluating when you start delegating is how it's affecting the ROI of your time. Time is an asset that once spent, you can't make more of it. You can't hoard your time now and use it just when you need it. It passes systematically, 1 second at a time, whether you like it or not. When you begin delegating, think about what time you'll free up to do other things and how they will affect your bottom line. When you begin delegating, you move into becoming a leader. A good leader who delegates is managing growth and not managing tasks. Take a good look at what you're doing and what activities will move you forward toward growth. What is it that helps you keep your current customers? What does it take to acquire new customers? What does it take to develop a better cash flow? In some industries, it's pretty easy to see that bringing on someone new, you can service more customers. If you are running a lawn service, for example, you bring in another person to mow lawns. You and they can be mowing twice as much. The math is kind of simple. But when it comes to administrative tasks, it's a little bit harder to see how that return really translates into your bottom line. It's not a matter of just delegating anything, but it's a matter of delegating strategically. Let's go over a few examples. I remember several years ago, a person that I met through my networking meetings came up to me and said, "Hey Gayla, I would love your help, but I just can't afford it." We visited a little bit, and his biggest stressor at the time was finding enough time to keep up with his invoicing of his customers. As we were talking, he explained that after being out in the field, helping customers and servicing the customers, taking all the phone calls, and keeping up with the schedule and scheduling those customers, it was very difficult to have the time or the energy to pull up his system in the evening time and begin invoicing. The more customers he'd have, the less time he'd have to invoice. I told him that without consistent invoices, there wasn't consistent cash flow. If someone like me were to do the invoices consistently, then he'd have the cash flow to afford the help. That's when we started working together. What happened was a system was created. He and I sat down together for an hour or two, and he explained what he wanted to see happen, how he did things, and how to use his invoicing system. We talked about the logistics of how I'd get the paperwork and what made sense in the frequency of work. Instead of working a little bit here and there, the most effective use of time was that I would block off a certain time each week and work on his project. How did he show ROI? Well, again, a system was created, whereas before, when he was just doing it himself, he would get to it when he got around to it. And around to it was very sporadic. He ended up investing some time to get me up to speed on his expectations. We would keep in communication with each other, and he made me feel like a part of his company, a part of his team. The system became routine. I became more efficient at it. His customers expected bills much more promptly. And guess what? He got payment much more promptly. He was able to lift the worry of trying to find the time of doing the invoicing and focusing more on servicing even more customers. He was able to focus on bringing in more customers. He leveraged his time and was able to accomplish more. Since then, I am so proud of him as he has grown his business from needing that one task completed on a weekly basis to needing a full-time assistant working in his office doing a variety of administrative tasks. Without proper delegation, then time management becomes a problem. What happens is, if you try to sustain a huge workload all on your own shoulders, you'll get burnt out. Quality of work becomes an issue. Remember, there is a difference between being busy and being productive. As I've grown Scrivener Solutions, I see how I'd like my company to prosper and to grow. I recognize that there is no way to achieve the income levels if I did everything myself. There's just simply no way. One thing that I got started early on as I was freelancing and before I added a team was to do print orders. I'd help people in my networking group to design and get business cards printed affordably. I would occasionally do brochures and other print products, but most often it would be business cards. This wasn't a large part of my business, but it was a part of it. Most of the time, my print order customers were one-time only customers. A lot of the time, they'd want a flat price on design and setup, and since it was for business cards, in theory, they shouldn't take very much time. When I'd get an order, that would take me away from doing my regular retainer work. Actually, it wasn't too bad about 80% of the time. But then, 20% of the time, a customer would want a cajillion changes on a 2 by 3.5 inch space. That drove me nuts. Something that shouldn't, again, in theory, take a ton of time would end up taking hours. It's a funny thing about the 80-20 rule. That 20% of the print orders seem to suck 80% of my time. This is when it took me away from my retainer clients. Then on top of that, chasing down payment became ridiculous. To focus my time better, I decided just to not do print orders any longer. I'd only provide that service to my retainer clients if they asked for it and if it worked well for them. Then I received a call from one of my best referral sources for my print orders. He was so sad that I wasn't doing the service any longer. We had a great discussion, and I talked to him about the direction of my business and my frustration and challenges of continuing to do print orders. He was hoping that I would make an exception. You see, he works for a company who have several agents. I have a template already that would only need minor changes because everyone in the company would have the same basic format. He proposed to me that instead of having all the agents from all over send in requests, that all the requests would come from one point of contact in the same format. During that conversation, I told him that I wouldn't personally be doing the orders. Instead, I'd assign the project to Brandy. Right out of the gate, I knew that I couldn't personally do the project because that would take me away from what I needed to do. Delegating the project to Brandy allows the company to provide a great service, at the same time increasing our revenue. A system was born. Brandy and I worked out all the steps that should be done when a print order is received. We have the steps listed in our project management system, Asana. This helps us to remember exactly what stage each order is in, whether we're in the design phase, we're waiting for approval, waiting for payment, if it's been ordered, shipped, whatever. Keeping this stuff straight is super helpful when you're working on several orders at one time. We even have the steps in a template when a new order is received. It's a quick matter of copying magic, and almost instantly we have all the tasks laid out for us. I'm quick to tell you that none of those tasks are assigned to me. Brandy is taking care of the orders from start to finish. What's perfect is that by having them listed in Asana, and I happen to get a phone call or an email with an inquiry, I know exactly where Brandy is at on the process and most likely can handle the question pretty quickly. Because of my challenges of the past and me not really having a system, that helped me to develop a system with Brandy and what I wanted to see happen with an ideal situation. We made policies, like for instance, paying for the cards before we placed the order. It's crazy, but believe it or not, I would go ahead and pay for the printing just to get the order in and back quickly, thinking I was helping the customer. Then that 80-20 rule kicked in. There were 20% of those folks that didn't pay upon receipt, and they had their cards, and I paid for them. I was not exactly smart, I guess, but I was doing myself and my business a disservice. I'd spent a ton of time trying to collect on just a little amount. It drove me nuts. Brandy and I implemented the policy that payment must be received before the order was released to go to the printer. It ruffled a few feathers, but really not to the ones who really mattered. It especially was well received by the gentleman who is my biggest referral on business card printing. And that's what mattered to me anyway. As I made the exception, I started doing print orders again because of him. At first, I was involved with some of the steps. Then over time, Brandy and I found more efficiencies. For example, I don't use an online version of QuickBooks. For personal reasons, I still want to use the desktop version. That may change someday, but for now, that's what I want to do. Invoicing comes out of QuickBooks, but Brandy doesn't have access to QuickBooks. It was crazy to put a kink in how fast an invoice was created for my print orders. My bookkeeping and data entry is done once a week by Arlene. If Arlene isn't available, then having the invoice wait a week is pretty silly, especially since I want payment before we place the order. Then it is even more silly to have me stop anything that I'm doing, get into QuickBooks, and create an invoice. It was just a non-negotiable point that Brandy needed to have the freedom to invoice. That would just streamline the process. At first, we simply created an invoice template in Excel and used that. It worked for a while, but the system needed to be better. I don't take a lot of credit card payments, but you see, all of my print orders are paid by credit card. I have a Pay My Bill button on my website, so we had instructions on the Excel invoice to point them to my website. The Pay button on my website is simply a PayPal button where people can either pay by PayPal or credit card. But wouldn't it be much better to have the invoice coming straight from PayPal so that we can have a nice place to quickly see which ones are paid and which ones are outstanding? You see, with the Excel invoices, Brandy had to depend on me to notify her when a payment was received. Sometimes, I admit, I was the bottleneck. I needed to be removed from the equation entirely. One day, while my husband and I were traveling around, I was sitting in the passenger seat and just messing around on my tablet and thinking about this process. We must have been on a long, straight road because I felt motivated to be working instead of being entertained by the sightseeing. Well, anyway, I was determined to find a way to take me out of that equation of the print orders and stop being the bottleneck for Brandy. I found where I could give Brandy a username and password for my PayPal account with limited access. I formatted the invoices in PayPal and created the items. Now, Brandy doesn't need me to tell her when she can place the order because payment was received. Besides, since there's a quick and easy link in the PayPal invoice for the customer, when they pay, it is applied to the invoice. We can quickly see which ones are outstanding and which ones are paid. Best of all, Arlene adds the transactions to QuickBooks when she reconciles the account. I'm out of the equation. Brandy is highly effective and efficient with the project. I look at the admin time she takes with the print orders based on the revenue generated, and it's quite a great asset for the company. My profit margin on print orders isn't extravagant by any means, but because bringing Brandy onto the project, I force myself to think and create consistent processes to be more efficient. My mind is free to think of other things and no longer worry about the details of a print order. Delegation with strategy in mind. Other things that you may delegate may not have a direct correlation to your bottom line, like with the consistent invoicing or having someone do a whole service line like I have Brandy doing with print orders. There are customer service or marketing tasks that you may delegate, and you may wonder if you're getting a return on your investment. Usually, customer service and marketing tasks must be done on a consistent basis to work. When you are extremely busy, it can be pretty easy for those tasks to be the first to fall off your to-do list. So those little things that add up and should be done consistently to be effective are done inconsistently or not at all. Then what happens? You become frustrated. You lose a client and you don't have any others in your pipeline. Then you hurry up and try to make up for lost time. You get busy again, and those things, again, fall to the wayside. There are no systems. Delegation helps you create systems and consistency. Let's take, for example, social media. It's a broadcast platform. It's quite crowded with messages. The very least that any business should be doing in this day and age is planning and posting consistent posts in social media. You have to be at least there to be seen. The consistent activity and engaging helps create your customer community, your fan base, if you want to call it that. You need to ask yourself, is it really an effective use of your time to be perusing on Facebook for hours every day? My day is already blocked off to be focused on client work. I knew, for me, I needed to be out there on social media, but not necessarily out there all the time. Several years ago, I blocked off time every weekend to plan and schedule my posts for the upcoming week. This worked for a while, but I found myself taking way too long. Besides, it was the weekend. I would much rather be doing something different with my time than just social media posts. That's when I brought Sharon on board. I gave her parameters of what I wanted, and she worked out a process. For at least 2, maybe 3 years, Sharon keeps me consistent with my social posts. Do I see a direct return on investment? Well, I do see the ROI for my time savings. I'm not distracted with doing the social media posts or worrying about them. They are out of my mind, and I'm focused on other important things in my business. My social media strategy is part of my branding. It's a part of me being accessible. It's a way to reach out to those who do spend time on social media and like to receive information from that platform. Did I recognize the value of having Sharon do my social post right away? Well, for me, it was a great weight lifted that I didn't have to think about it anymore. But have I gained new customers from her social media posts? I'll be honest, that's hard to pinpoint. I haven't had one person come up to me and say, "Hey, Gayla, I saw you on Facebook and I have to hire you right now." Nope. That just doesn't happen. What I do recognize is that those consistent posts have helped me to be seen and to become known. I use social media with my face-to-face networking, my emails, and it's simply another form of communication to basically be available to help, even if it's with a simple quote meme. It has taken time, but I, more often than I used to, have people come up to me and say, "Hey, you seem to be everywhere." And that's nice. Sharon's consistency of posts is helping me to be everywhere, keeping me at the top of mind when someone may need my services. So to sum everything up, when you are strategic with your time and shift from being the doer to being a leader, you should be managing growth instead of managing tasks. Look at your investment in a way that you see processes take shape and how you are using your time to generate additional revenue with the time that you've saved, not doing those tasks that you've delegated. No matter how small the project may seem, delegating needs to be done in order for you to grow your business. As Steve Jobs has said, great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. I do hope you enjoyed today's show and found it helpful. I'd be honored if you'd subscribe on iTunes and leave a comment. You can always send questions and comments to podcast@scrivenersolutions.com. That's podcast at SCRIVENER solutions.com. Until next time, have a fantastic week.